Hello friends, we have started the third week now with Abdul Kalam's text When I Failed. This is the first piece of writing that we discuss in this course on literature and life. We will see the objectives and a biographical approach to Abdul Kalam, and then introduce a text When I Failed, then see some of the key incidents and reflections in the text with reference to theme, form, language and literary devices, and then we will also look into the human relationships and certain reflections on life which will be useful to us. We will make a comparison between Abdul Kalam and Steve Jobs, and finally provide certain takeaways which will be very useful to you. Here are the objectives of this presentation: to consider the life and writings of Abdul Kalam, to read and discuss some extracts from the essay When I Failed, to examine Kalam's belief in and experience of failure as a prerequisite for success in life, to analyze the linguistic and literary qualities of the essay, to understand the crux of human relationships in managing failures, and finally to reflect on the inevitable phase of failures in our own life. Abdul Kalam is a legendary personality who is known to everybody in India and abroad. Still, we will have a biographical approach and understand some of the major points about his life. Abdul Kalam was born in 1931 and died in 2015. He led a very simple life largely because he hailed from a humble family. After his schooling, he received a BSc degree in physics. Though his aim was to become a pilot, he didn't know that there was something called aeronautical engineering. Later, to fulfill his aspiration, he pursued a diploma in aeronautical engineering in Madras Institute of Technology, Krompet, Chennai. Later on, with this kind of education, he could become a scientist, a technologist, an advisor to the government of India, and later, to his own surprise, he became the president of our own country. He achieved many things in his life, both in science and technology and also in society. His major contributions are in ISRO and DRDO, that is Indian Space Research Organization, and Defence Research and Development Organization. I would consider his social achievements much more useful to our country because he was a man who symbolized mobility from a simple village life to the Rashtrapati Bhavan. And because of his learning and valuable experience, he started writing books for motivating children, giving talks for children. He met school children across the country. Wherever he went, he made it a point to address school and college students. So he was able to make a connect with the youth of all ages, of all areas in India. In sum, he had a great vision for India as a developed country. He was one rare human being who exemplified, who stood for this vision of a developed country. That's why he would address legislative assemblies in various states to share his ideas with the legislature. His quotation we have here is, "Small aim is a crime, have a great aim." He went on to say this wherever he spoke. Small aim is a crime, have a great aim. Even if you are not able to achieve that great aim, doesn't matter, but we must aim very high. That's why he always remembered Thirukural as a motivating piece of literature for his life. Abdul Kalam has written many books. Many of them are with collaborators like Arun Tiwari. As you can see here within this slide, we have 4 books collaborated with Arun Tiwari. The first autobiographical book that we have from Abdul Kalam is Wings of Fire. Later on, he continued this autobiography in Turning Points and published another book. In addition to these autobiographical books, he has other books as well, like Ignited Minds, The Luminous Sparks, Guiding Souls, You Are Born to Blossom, Indomitable Spirit, Squaring the Circle, My Journey, Forge Your Future, and Transcendence. This list is only a representative of Abdul Kalam's writings. There are many other books which we have not mentioned here. We have chosen the essay When I Failed from this book, primarily meant for children and college going students, My Journey. Anyone can read this book and find that motivation for living a meaningful life. When I Failed is a chapter from Abdul Kalam's book My Journey, published in 2013. This kind of experience he has shared in many other contexts, especially Wings of Fire. But then he wanted to keep on articulating his idea of failure and success in different forms of writing and also wherever he spoke. In this piece, he gives success lessons from the experiences of failure in life. We will focus on failure as a key to greater success in this essay. The whole idea of this essay is never be afraid of failure. In fact, failure may lead to some other success which we would not have imagined. Now, we are going to look at some extracts from this essay. We have given some topics for them so that you can understand how they are thematically focused. The first topic that we look into this essay is belief in failure. I firmly believe that unless one has tasted the bitter pill of failure, one cannot aspire for success. This is what Abdul Kalam says in his essay. He goes on to add, I have seen both sides of the coin and have learned life's toughest lessons when I have stared into the pit of despair that failure brings with it. These lessons are well worth recounting and remembering, as they have helped me work my way through many difficult situations. This sharing of personal experience for the benefit of readers is a noble gesture on the part of Abdul Kalam. Abdul Kalam deals with two kinds of failures in this essay. The first failure is about low-level attack aircraft design when he was a student at the Madras Institute of Technology in Chennai. He describes this failure. This is just not good enough, Kalam, he said, that is his professor. He turned his stern eyes on me and continued, I expect much better work from you. This is dismal work and I am disappointed that someone with your talent has come up with work like this. I stared at the professor, dumbfounded. I had always been the star pupil in any class and had never ever been pulled up by a teacher for anything. He recognizes the professor's contribution to his understanding of the first failure. He quotes the words of the professor, this is just not good enough, Kalam. And so we have the direct speech from the professor's own voice for dramatic effect, highlighting the importance of failure in one's life. Actually, this was Professor Srinivasan who warned Kalam about the kind of study that he was doing, that is Abdul Kalam was doing. When Kalam's team failed to design a low-level attack aircraft, Professor Srinivasan warned Kalam, today is Friday afternoon, young man. I want to see a flawless configuration drawing by Monday evening. If you are unable to do so, your scholarship will be stopped, Professor Srinivasan said. And this is a command and also a condition. Failure in designing the aircraft is something which disturbed Abdul Kalam very deeply, because he had some high expectation. He would do very well and he could satisfy the professor's expectation, but then his work or his team's work did not satisfy the professor, and so the professor warned Kalam and his team to prepare another design within 2 days. So how is it possible? But then this impossible deadline Abdul Kalam met, and the catch here is scholarship. We have to remember that Abdul Kalam was from a humble family. He didn't have enough money to support his own studies. Therefore, he had to depend on a Government of India scholarship for his studies. So when Professor Srinivasan warned him that the scholarship would be stopped, he became dumbfounded, he became bewildered. What would he do? That was his question at that time. Because of the warning from the professor, Kalam became depressed. He says, I was even more dumbfounded now. The scholarship was the only way I could afford my studies. My own ambitions, the dreams of my parents, my sister and Jalaluddin, his brother-in-law, flashed before my eyes and seemed to recede to a distance. It was unthinkable that the future could turn so bleak with a few words spoken by my professor. The professor had the best of his intention to enable Abdul Kalam to prepare and come up with a good design. But then at the time when the warning was given to him, he was completely depressed and he thought about his own family and the kind of future that his own family imagined for him. From this passage we can appreciate that words have a power beyond our imagination. If you use good words, motivating words, they will be useful. If you use negative words and depressing words, they may not help the people. In this context, we can compare R.K. Narayan's short story, The Doctor's Word. There is a doctor called Raman who knew that his friend Gopal would die. As a patient, he would die. But then Gopal believed in his friend and so the doctor said, you would live. And he treated him like any other patient without expecting that his friend would live. But Gopal believed in the doctor's words and so he survived. It was a miraculous experience for the doctor in this short story. So similar kind of miraculous experience we can find in Abdul Kalam, that the professor believed in him to prepare the design within 2 days, which he did. Here are certain lessons from the first failure. To quote Abdul Kalam, that day I learnt 2 lessons. A teacher who has his or her students' progress in mind is the best possible friend because the teacher knows how to make sure that you excel. And second, there is no such thing as an impossible deadline. This experience he had when he was working on the integrated guided missile program for the government of India. I have worked on many tough assignments, some of which had the country's top leaders watching over my work. But the assurance I gained in my capabilities at MIT thanks to Professor Srinivasan helped me later in life too. When someone warns us, cautions us, when someone tells us something, we should not feel bad, we should look at the positive side of it and make use of it. We never know how such a kind of training would be useful. Abdul Kalam wouldn't have thought about this kind of integrated guided missile program which he led as a team leader. This experience was very useful to him. So in this context we have a beautiful sentence for us: a good teacher is a gift for a good student. Now we move on to the second failure experience that Abdul Kalam described with reference to his own interview for the post of a pilot. To quote, I had wanted this job for so long and so deeply that I was determined yet anxious, confident and at the same time tense. Finally, the results were announced. I had stood 9th in a batch of 25. There were only 8 places available. I had failed to realize my dream of becoming an Air Force pilot. This was a blow to Abdul Kalam. He couldn't imagine that he would miss it. Right from his childhood, he wanted to become a pilot, that too an Air Force pilot. But when he found the results, he felt really sad and depressed. From this experience, what we understand is that a failure cannot finish your future, our future. One failure is just one failure. It may be a stepping stone, as a proverb says, to another greater success. We can see variety in sentence length in this passage. There are long and short sentences. We also have past perfect and simple past tense in some of these sentences, like I had wanted this job for so long and so deeply that I was determined yet anxious. Some kind of parallelism also we can find, parallel sentence construction we can find in the very first sentence. I was determined yet anxious, confident and at the same time tense. We have a very short sentence in the next line. Finally, the results were announced. So this kind of sentence variation is very important for us to break the monotony in reading a passage. What it means to have that experience of failure, it is certainly painful. That's why we have this topic, the pain of failure. Abdul Kalam says, I still remember the ache in my heart as I attempted to make sense of what had happened. When a dearly held desire begins to break up, one can feel nothing but despair and emptiness as one tries to come to terms with the end of a dream. I could not bear to be indoors after seeing the result. I had to go out for air and be in the open because all around me the walls seemed to close in. I walked around for a while till I reached the edge of a cliff. This passage deals with the pain of failure, as we said earlier. Therefore, when we express our pain, we will have some complex feeling, and that is reflected in terms of the complex sentence structures in this passage. One of the lessons that we have to take away from this passage is that never stay indoor alone when you are depressed. Depression comes to all of us in different ways in different times, and at that time we should not be alone, particularly enclosed in a room. We should go around, see the world, particularly look at the sky or trees or whatever is visible to us. We should see everything else so that we can forget ourselves. Now after this, he went on to visit Sivananda's ashram, and there he had an experience which he describes in this passage. As I entered, I felt a strange vibration, a sense of tranquility that was like a balm for my restless soul. Sadhus were seated all around, deep in meditation. I hoped that one among them would be able to answer the questions that troubled me and soothe my worries. I was granted an audience with Swami Sivananda himself. My being a Muslim did not affect him in any way. Instead, before I could speak, he asked what had filled me with sorrow. Abdul Kalam was sad, he was sorrowful, he was miserable, he completely depressed, and he wanted some soothing words for him. And Swami Sivananda gave those soothing words. In fact, Swami Sivananda guided Abdul Kalam to understand the situation of his life at that time. Abdul Kalam says, "He listened calmly and then washed away my anxieties with a smile of deep peacefulness. His next words were some of the most profound I had ever heard. His feeble and yet deep voice still resonates when I think of them." Swami Sivananda said, "Accept your destiny and go ahead with your life. You are not destined to become an Air Force pilot. What you are destined to become is not revealed now, but it is predetermined. Forget this failure, as it was essential to lead you to your destined path. Search instead for the true purpose of your existence. Surrender yourself to the wish of God." This lesson, this guidance for Abdul Kalam had a deep impression on Kalam. So Kalam says, that lesson made a deep impression on my mind. Truly, why fight against destiny? If there is some destiny, why fight against it? Accept your destiny. This is one lesson, one major lesson that Abdul Kalam learnt from this experience. Many readers may not accept what Kalam says here. If you are a believer in some religion or some kind of guru, you may believe it. If you don't believe anybody, you can't accept it. But then, this is the experience that Abdul Kalam had. With this experience, he could achieve so many things that nobody can deny. Kalam understood the failure of his own life in different ways after these two experiences. So he shares these experiences with students especially and anybody who is interested in understanding life. Like me, he says, I am sure almost every person who sets out with a goal has had to face unexpected obstacles. We have had to rethink our goals, reorient our paths. Each setback teaches us a new facet of life and something about our own personalities. When we tackle obstacles, we find hidden reserves of courage and resilience we did not know we had. And it is only when we are faced with failure do we realize that these resources were always within us. We only need to find them and move on with our lives. If we are afraid of failures, we may not know the resources that we have within ourselves. So, we can face problems squarely to find the strength within. That's the greatest gift one can have. Now, let us see the thematic contrast that we have in this essay. Obviously, the contrast is between success and failure. If you have a goal, you work towards it and then you achieve the goal or you fail in your goal. So, associated with this success and failure, we have many other contrasts like knowledge and wisdom. Knowledge comes from experience, and when it is refined, it becomes wisdom. Hope and despair, student and teacher, or mentee and mentor, pain and pleasure. If we achieve our goal, we feel happy. If we don't achieve our goal, we feel painful. There is a lot of difference between dream and reality, satisfaction and disappointment. And in this context, we also have to think about who is our friend and who is our enemy. Is a teacher who is advising the student to prepare a good design an enemy or a friend? It all depends on our perspective. Peace and restlessness, desire and destiny, obstacles and facilitators. There are some obstacles always in our way. That's why one of the greatest thinkers has said, nothing can be achieved without facing obstacles. Then lastly, we have resilience and defeatism. We can accept fate and just forget everything in our life, and there is also another way of approaching fate. We can accept fate and still keep on working towards our goal. That's what Abdul Kalam did. That's what most successful people on earth do. Now we will look into the form of this essay that is presented by Abdul Kalam. The mode of the essay is a personal and reflective essay. Obviously, it deals with the personal experience of Abdul Kalam, and there is a kind of reflection on why this failure happened. What is the meaning of this failure in my life? That's a question that Abdul Kalam had, and he shares that with us. And the point of view that he adopts is first person narrative. He says everything on his own, through his own mouth. He quotes the words of Professor Srinivasan or the words of Swami Sivananda for dramatic effect for us. The structure of the essay goes on like this. There is an aim to share the experiences of failures with the readers. He gives two examples of failures, the failure in designing a low level aircraft attack and then the failure in the interview. We have certain lessons to learn from this essay. There is nothing that is impossible to achieve. What we need to do is to accept our destiny and find out what we are destined to achieve and not what we wish. Sometimes what we wish may not happen and we need not be upset about it, and in many cases it may turn out to be good for us. What we wish may not be our destiny. Let us do a linguistic analysis of this essay. We have certain statements and other things, but then one of the most important aspects of the linguistic analysis that we can have in this is imperative. Advice, caution, everything is given in the form of some imperative. This is what Swami Sivananda says: accept your destiny and go ahead with your life. Surrender yourself to the wish of God. And one can accept the command or imperative, or one may not accept it. On the other hand, we find Abdul Kalam saying, truly, why fight against destiny? He raises it as a question, but then it is again kind of imperative: accept destiny. We have complex sentences and also variations in sentence length and the use of first person narration using I we have in this essay. So we are able to connect with the writer and the subject of failure also, and we can learn quite a lot of things from the life of an individual like Abdul Kalam. This is an essay, fine. Why do we have to consider as a piece of writing as part of our course on literature and life? So we have set out to do a literary analysis focusing on certain literary qualities or devices like metaphor and simile. This is a personal essay and it has a strong emotion. Anywhere you have strong emotion, you will find poetry, and therefore you will find metaphor and simile as well. We have a number of metaphors in this essay, in this short essay. Let's see some of them here. I have stared into the pit of despair that failure brings with it. So when you read this line, you will find there is a pit, you look into it, and it is difficult to come out from that pit actually. Next, I had always been the star people in any class, star people, star in the sky, shining like a star, always successful, cheerful, always praised by teachers, but in this case alone, Abdul Kalam had to face some kind of warning from his professor. Then Jalaluddin flashed before my eyes like a torch. The brother-in-law appeared before him. Next, a dearly held desire begins to break up. Desire is an abstract concept, but then you see how it is going to break up like a building or some wooden object or a glass piece. All around me the walls seem to close in. Imagine the walls around us coming and closing in on us. He asked what had filled me with sorrow. That means Abdul Kalam is something like a jug or something like a vessel, and sorrow is filled in him. He listened calmly and then washed away my anxieties with a smile of deep peacefulness. So we can see the washing away of anxieties. Strong feeling of anxiety or tense feeling of dissatisfaction and happiness, everything is just washed away. Everything is clean and pure after this washing away. We have a simile like this here, a sense of tranquility that was like a balm for my restless soul. Balm, something like a remedy for pain, and so here we have this sense of tranquility from Swami Sivananda as a balm for the restless soul of Abdul Kalam. Naturally, we can treat this essay as a literary piece and consider it useful for us in the context of this course. What is important for throughout the course is all about human relationships. What kind of relationships we have with our family members. For example, Abdul Kalam says about his sister and also about his brother-in-law. It was his sister who actually gave her bangles for pledging them to get some money for joining the college. And it was Jalaluddin who always mentored Abdul Kalam, so he remembers them. Abdul Kalam also remembers his teachers, Professor Srinivasan, and also the spiritual guide Swami Sivananda. How one relates to another person, how one takes the words of others to guide one's own life, and that kind of relationship with teachers and spiritual gurus becomes very important. Then relationship with the entire society, particularly in terms of organizations and employees. When we look for some job, we apply to an organization, appear for an interview, if selected we join that organization. How do we relate ourselves to such organizations and the people who work there? Then relationship with self is much more important. How do we relate to ourselves when we succeed and when we don't succeed? In this case, Abdul Kalam examines the impact of failure on his own life, and that analysis is useful to us. We can also relate to Abdul Kalam and our own self, and that's where the relationship with the audience comes in. We find this sharing of personal experience of failure very useful to us. Now, to reflect on life with reference to the text by Abdul Kalam, we have a series of questions. What is success? Is success measured by getting a job? Is success measured by getting a scholarship? Similarly, what is failure? How do you measure failure? And the biggest question that we have is, why are we born? What is our destiny? What is our fate? Or what are we going to do with our life? How do we deal with failures which we have to face in course of our life? One or two successes in life are interspersed with many failures. We may not notice the failures of people, successful people. We always look at some idols of success, but behind those successes many other failures are there. What is the role of an academic teacher and also a spiritual guide? A teacher like Professor Srinivasan, what is his role? Or what is the role of a spiritual guide like Swami Sivananda? How does a member of a society approach different kinds of guides in our life? What is the use of thinking about our own life, particularly when we are faced with failures? How do we understand the mystery of life? Why do certain things happen the way in which they do? That is a mystery of life. One day we are born, another day we are dead. Something happens in between. and suddenly everything disappears from the scene. This is the mystery of life. Why does it happen? We don't know. And from the experiences of individuals like Abdul Kalam, we can make out something like if you are born in a poor family like this, you don't have to worry too much. Keep on doing something for yourself. Suddenly one day you may become the president of country and help a lot of people. That is the biggest achievement of Abdul Kalam. He worked with people who were not connected with him in any way, like for example medical field, and helped large number of patients. How do we connect the dots to clear the fundamental doubts about our life? We have certain basic questions about life. What is life? Why are we born? And how do we link all these happenings and make some meaning out of our life? And we don't have very specific answers. It depends on individuals. When we ask questions in a given moment, we understand life in one way, and after 1 year, after 1 week, we may understand the same incident in a different way. That's why we have to look into our own self and analyze the experiences that we have. Abdul Kalam's experience presented in this essay will be useful for us to relate for ourselves. Now we can make a comparison between Abdul Kalam and Steve Jobs. Abdul Kalam is a technologist and Steve Jobs is also a technologist, but they have made a name for themselves in the world of humanity. Abdul Kalam and Steve Jobs, they were born in a poor background. So Abdul Kalam was born in a poor family, but then Steve Jobs was given away to foster parents. While Kalam had a passion for flying, Steve Jobs had a passion for calligraphy, that is writing. Abdul Kalam directed many different projects, whereas Steve Jobs established this Apple company. While Kalam met with many failures in his life, it's so sad to see that Steve Jobs was thrown out of his own company and he went on to create more companies. In the case of Abdul Kalam, we can see creative services to society, and in the case of Steve Jobs, we can find creative products, Apple computers, iPhones, and so many other technological devices that we have. Abdul Kalam rose to become the people's president. Similarly, Steve Jobs rose to become the people's technologist. While Abdul Kalam ignited the minds of people everywhere, Steve Jobs innovated the minds of people to think differently. Abdul Kalam is considered to be the welder of people, whereas Steve Jobs is considered to be the connector of dots. It is good for us to listen to the speech of Steve Jobs at Stanford University. We can see how he could connect the dots. Only when we think back, we can connect the dots. Otherwise, we won't be able to do. So there are many reasons why we are here. I never imagined that I would offer this NPTEL course, and you wouldn't have imagined that you would be doing this course. So there is a number of dots which we have to connect and see where we are heading towards. What are the takeaways from this literary piece? We have listed many of them here. Failures cannot and should not terminate our life. That's the first takeaway we have to consider. We have to pull up our socks and pull on. Nothing should stop us. We should keep moving. We have to understand that success is not a rocket science. Remember, rocket science will require some abilities which ordinary people may not have. But success is not at all rocket science. Anyone can understand success in his or her own way, in limited ways. Anyone can reach the highest office of the country, Prime Minister or President or anything like that. Prepare your ground and be prepared to take up your responsibilities. We have to keep on preparing ourselves right from our childhood. Suddenly something will not happen in our old age. A common man or a common woman can become an uncommon human being with all these small activities which pile up and then make a huge image for the rest of the world. An ordinary person shines as an indomitable spirit and inspiring spirit. It is possible, as in the case of Abdul Kalam and many others. If God be with you, who can be against you? We have to remember that Abdul Kalam was a believer. He believed in God. He was a devoted spiritual person. Faith in oneself is actually faith in God. We may not know whether God exists or not. At least we know that we exist. Can we believe in ourselves? And I do believe that we can believe in ourselves and help ourselves. To give you a summary of the presentation we have had now, we looked at the objectives of this presentation to look into the life of Abdul Kalam and his writings and read the essay When I Failed and discuss some parts of the essay with reference to two key incidents. We reflected on those incidents as well. We undertook a thematic, formal, linguistic and literary analysis of the essay. Then we moved on to reflect on human relationships and the course of life in general. We compared Abdul Kalam with Steve Jobs and then suggested certain takeaways which will be useful to all of us. We have some references for you. Please look into them and learn more about Abdul Kalam. Here is the list of references for you. Thank you. Never fear failure. Take failure in the stride and keep moving in your life. Thank you.